Sadila told him it was actually because he wasn't emotionally strong. Caesar assured him, saying he would definitely improve. No one could deny that the two masters in front of him were on a whole other level, though. He turned his attention towards the pair and told them that they must have been tired from all the working, so he would get them a place to stay for the night. He told them they could just relax for the day, and they would discuss the real business tomorrow. Sadila was told to show them around and make them feel at home. He led them to the garden where ministers usually rested after meetings. He told them he also came here a lot. Langmo was staring at him. He could notice he was worried about something. He judged that the illusion from the third exam must have hit him hard. No matter what it was still his choice, so he figured he should probably stay out of this. Sadila continued telling them about his past. He reminisced about how his father would bring him here all the time when he was young. From here one can see the entire fragrant wind city. His father had told him that he would come here whenever he wasn't feeling well. He would always end up feeling much better once he saw the prosperous capital. This was the empire his father had built, and it was his pride and glory. His father had sacrificed everything for this empire, but now he was very sick. He felt like it was impossible for him to guard his father's pride. He had a sad look in his eyes like he wanted to cry. He turned towards Langmo and asked him if he was aiming for Brunate since he had joined Caesar's campaign. Langmo fell silent before telling him he was right. He confessed that he had some personal business with him and asked Sadila why he was asking. He warned him not to try and talk him out of his revenge. Sadila protested that he would never do so. He just wished for him to end all of this nonsense. Because of his brothers fighting for the throne, the empire was losing its prosperity. He didn't want his father's hard work to be for nothing and felt like he needed to stop all of this. He insisted that he was going to protect his father's pride. Langmo was lying on his bed. He was thinking about what Sadila had said. He had asked him if he had any plans on how he would protect his father. Sadila looked worried and blurted out that he didn't know what to do. He had just said what he was thinking. Langmo laughed at him for sounding so confident without even having a plan. Sadila told him he had meant it, but Langmo insisted that his face was just hilarious. He asked him to quit laughing and Langmo finally stopped. He knew it was a tough task to stop his brothers from fighting. Sadila asked him if he had a plan in mind. The fight for succession was going to happen no matter what, but a lot of ministers and princes were supporting Brunate. Langmo told him he had heard that Caesar was supposed to become king since he was next in line after the eldest prince's death, but his father had supposedly never named an official heir to the throne. Sadila added that all the ministers were now panicking, and they didn't know who they were supposed to support. Langmo noted that the battle for succession wasn't just about the royals, but it also meant profit for the ministers holding business. The upper house would have loved to see this happen. A king that was elected out of competition would benefit the empire the most. All he could do was help Caesar get the throne. Sadila reckoned he might have been too childish to think that he could stop the fighting. Langmo told him there was one way, though. Sadila told him to hurry up and tell him. Langmo stated that it was not likely to happen, but he might be able to become king. Sadila was shocked. Langmo told him that was all he could think of right now. He was also a prince, so he could go for the throne as well. If he won, he would become a game changer. Langmo admitted he knew how difficult it was for him, but he wouldn't make it if he never tried. For now, he just needed to become a candidate for the throne. He would then need to get his hands dirty behind the scenes to win. This was the only possible way if he wanted to stop them. He had decided to leave the final judgment all up to him. Sadila took a moment to think about it and finally agreed. He told him he would give it a try. Langmo could see a sharp look in his eyes. He told him he could use his relationship with Caesar to learn how to treat others. Sadila showed them he would try his best, and Langmo announced that he was tired and going to bed. Langmo was satisfied with their conversation. He was now aligned with Caesar, and he just needed a plan to defeat Brunate. He wondered if the Holy Roman book could be in the royal palace. He figured he should ask Sadila about it and hope the book wouldn't be there. Brunate had too many forces in the area, and it would be impossible for him to fight him on his home turf. He feared Caesar wouldn't stand up for him even if he were to get killed by Brunate. He knew he needed to keep a low profile from now on. The next day, the pair returned to the palace to meet Caesar. He asked them if they had rested well, to which Langmo politely told him they had. He insisted them not to act so courteous in front of him since no one else was around and told them they should have lunch soon. There was a party the same day, and he wanted them to come along with him. Bing Yu started drooling at the thought of food and insisted they should hurry up. The three made their way into the hall, and a guard announced that Caesar was here. Caesar told the pair to enjoy themselves as everyone on their side was invited. He wanted Langmo to get to know the others. Suddenly, someone interrupted them. He made a sarcastic remark about how someone had been making a lot of noise, and it had turned out to be his brother, having a party in the palace. He further added that he was heartbroken, not being invited by his own brother. Caesar pointed out that he had come anyways, so it didn't matter. Brunate stated that there was no way he would miss a party of his, so it was obvious that he would come. Caesar asked him if there would be any difference with or without him here, and warned him not to cause any trouble today. He was going to kick him out if he did so. Langmo took a look at him. Brunate looked back, and just then, he felt something strange. The holy book was resonating inside his body. This must have meant that it had connected with the holy book in Brunate's possession. He noticed that Brunate was also in shock, and realized that he now knew Langmo had a holy book with him. Brunate gave him a dirty look of satisfaction, and he instantly began regretting bringing the book along with him. Langmo realized that Brunate must have noticed his holy book from the look of his face. This was a bad situation. He had never even thought about such a possibility. He knew he needed to be more aware of Brunate from now on. It was just as he had thought. Brunate was wondering why he hadn't sensed the holy book on Langmo before. He was completely sure now that the reason the dwarf chief hadn't been able to summon was because Langmo had used the power of the phoenix. But he hadn't felt the existence of a holy book back then. He wondered if he had gone back to the dwarf during those few days to collect it. There was no doubt that he was holding the last dwarf's holy book. Things seemed to be getting more interesting for him. He let out a little smile, and Caesar asked him if something was funny. He told him he had just realized something and was so happy that he couldn't control himself. Langmo was fully on his toes now. Brunate told Caesar that he liked his guard and asked him if it was okay for Brunate to have him. Caesar told him to stop being so ridiculous. He inquired if that was why he had come here. If that was the reason, then he was going to have to ask him to politely leave. Brunate mockingly told him he was so ruthless. He presumed he had no choice but to leave then. He took a good look at Langmo, and Langmo tried to act normal. The group started to leave, and Caesar apologized for his brother's intrusion. It was time for them to head on to the party. Brunate was still thinking about him. He told one of his men to bring him Master Taylor. He now knew where the holy book was, and had decided that it was going to be his. Caesar was having a meeting with Langmo and Bing Yu. He told them they had witnessed the situation firsthand today. He complained about how Brunate had been bothering him like this for quite some time. Even though the Senate was mostly supporting him, the army was mainly controlled by Brunate. He couldn't just start a war with him right now. He needed to maintain the balance between them. If Brunate were to catch a flaw of his and use it to start a war against him, he was afraid he would lose. Most importantly, the only great mage in the nation, Master Taylor, was on his side. This is one of the reasons why no one dared to go against him. Langmo was surprised to hear the great fire mage's name. His presence was apparently the factor that worried Caesar the most. Master Taylor was the biggest trump card Brunate had with him. Langmo realized this was why Caesar had wanted them to join him. It was not because of their abilities, but because of their master's allegiance. Since the inner court was on his side, Brunate couldn't get his hands on him right now. He had known that it would be impossible for Caesar to fight him anyways, so he had focused on expeditions for then. He had defeated several small nations around, and had even destroyed the Orc Kingdom at the far north. In the Fragrant Wind Empire, there was no doubt that victories at expeditions had massive influence. The ministers who had claimed to stay neutral were slowly starting to support Brunate. He informed them that he had been focusing on internal affairs, and as such he didn't have any trustworthy army generals around him. If things were to keep going like this, Brunate would eventually surpass him. This was why he had invited both of them. He needed a spear to fight for him. Soon, their nation was going to attack the Sunset Empire, and the Senate was deciding who would lead the army. He wanted to make sure both of them went to join. There was no doubt that they would become appointed as one of the generals. Langmo interrupted him, saying he had an idea. He didn't want the two of them to attend the Fragrant Wind army, and figured it was best to let Brunate do the work. Caesar seemed confused. Langmo explained that even if they did become generals, most of the others would still be on Brunate's side. The other generals were going to obviously set obstacles for them then. The Sunset Empire was also a tough nation. It would have been difficult for two new generals to lead the army. Langmo asked him if he had heard about him before. He was actually known as the Evil Lord. This was because he had fought in a war at the Sunset Empire. If he were to join the Sunset again and defeat Brunate's army, that might be much more effective in stopping his ambitions. Once they defeated Brunate, Caesar could then start spreading rumors about him. That way they would kill his forces as well. Caesar was shocked. He had never thought of this before, but it was going to be difficult to get them into the Sunset Empire's army. Langmo informed him that he was good friends with their border defense general, Qianhao Zi. Caesar decided to approve his plan and told him to do as he had said. He told him he was going to succeed, but he needed to do some preparations to trick Brunate's spies first. Caesar said that it wasn't a problem, and he would fake their deaths in 2 days. Langmo laughed out loud, saying he was a genius. Caesar asked them to head to the Sunset Empire right after that, and Langmo agreed. The two of them were walking back to their room. Bing Yu told him that he didn't seem to look well at the party today, and asked him if something had happened. Langmo told him that he was afraid Brunate knew about his identity. Bing Yu was surprised. He added that this was why he was suggesting plans for Caesar. He wanted them to keep a low profile for these few days in case Brunate attacked them. Just then, someone called out to them, saying that it seemed they were preparing for something. The pair was caught off guard and shouted at the voice to show itself. Lengmo couldn't sense him and realized he was dangerous. The voice announced that they were not going to survive this since he was here now. The two turned around, ready to fight. The man proclaimed that he was here to take their lives. His aura felt really powerful, and they could tell that he was a great mage. Lengmo asked him who he was. The man figured it wouldn't hurt to tell since they were going to die anyways. He was Taylor, Fragrant Empire's only great mage. Lengmo reminded him that they were in the capital and asked him if he wasn't afraid of the guards noticing. Taylor corrected him, asking him to look around and say that again. The two realized they were actually somewhere else. This could only have been possible through spatial magic. Bing Yu asked him if he wasn't actually a fire user. Taylor advised them to not underestimate him. He might have been a fire type, but he also knew a bit of spatial magic. There was no way the guards outside were going to notice anything in his space. He told them it was now time for them to die and activated his ability, Chaotic Flame Balls. He shot them straight at the duo, who barely managed to dodge them. Lengmo was intimidated by how fast the fireballs were. They also seemed to consist of extremely pure fire elements, which made them even more dangerous. Lengmo jumped out of the way of the attack. Just then, he felt something behind him. He realized that he had just hit the spatial wall. The spatial room was actually much smaller than they had realized. They were not going to be able to keep dodging if he kept casting spells in such a small space. Taylor dared them to try doing so in such a confined area and unleashed a barrage of fireballs. Lengmo was extremely taken aback by his skills since he had managed to release so many fireballs at once. It was not good to just keep dodging, though, and he knew they needed to charge and attack. Even though he was a great mage, Bing Yu told him they still had a small chance of defeating him. Lengmo agreed and activated his blazing aura. He told him he would take care of his fireballs and suggested him to take charge instead. Even though they were both fire type, he was aware that Taylor's fireballs could still deal a lot of damage to him. Bing Yu switched to the offensive. Taylor blurted out that Bilinasi and Firely had taught them well, and it seemed like he was the one who had been underestimating them. It was time for them to learn the difference between their level. A large amount of heat began emanating from him. Bing Yu's icy tornadoes completely evaporated. Lengmo could not do anything to block it either. This was the first time they had witnessed the power of a great mage. Taylor told them he would give them a chance to live. He had been informed that Lengmo had a holy book and explained that the fourth prince had ordered him to come and take it. He told him to quickly hand it over to him and maybe he could spare their lives. Lengmo had already realized this and cursed at Brunate. The holy book was the relic of the dwarves, and he knew he couldn't just give it to him, but if he didn't hand it over to him, then Bing Yu would end up dying as well. He knew he was too strong and there was no way they could win. Taylor told him he would give him 10 more minutes to think about it. Additionally, he hinted that he also knew a way to open his spatial bag. Lengmo didn't want to get Bing Yu involved in this, but he didn't understand what he was supposed to do. He heard Bing Yu telling him that he had never heard about the holy book from him, which must have meant that it was important to him. He told him to not worry about it and refused to give it to him. If they were going to die, they would die together. Even if they did give it to him, there was no guarantee that he would let them go. He didn't seem particularly skilled at spatial magic, and there was probably no way he could open his bag. Lengmo didn't want to agree with him, but he reminded him that he was the smart guy and told him to not let things like this mess with his head. It seemed to Taylor that their answer was a no, and he did not like troublesome they were. He was tired of waiting, and told them he would then torture them to death and see if they could last long enough. Something strange started to happen and Lengmo and Bing Yu began screaming. Flames started to form around Lengmo and Taylor noticed it. Slowly, the flames took the form of a phoenix, leaving him shocked. Phoenix asked them if they were okay. Lengmo stated that he was feeling much better now. Taylor could not believe that he was possessed by the phoenix. This must have meant that he was the evil lord. He was one who had stolen the phoenix from the fourth prince. He couldn't believe that the phoenix would serve someone like him. He had heard that the phoenix had been harshly wounded, and now it seemed nothing more than a chicken. He asked him if he really thought it could defend against his fire magic. He declared that he was going to make the phoenix his. Phoenix asked Lengmo who the mage was. He seemed like a narcissist to him, and he asked Lengmo to get him out of his face. Lengmo knew that there was no point in hiding anymore since he already knew his identity. He pulled out his sword and announced that the brothers were going to defeat him today. Taylor ridiculed the baby phoenix, asking him if he really thought he could challenge him with that. He ordered him to quit underestimating a great mage. Lengmo knew what he was saying was true, but what he didn't know was that a mage still had less physical power than sword masters. This meant that they still had a chance. Taylor began to fire another fireball at them. It headed straight towards them, and Leng Mo asked Phoenix to defend them. Phoenix did as he was told, sending shockwaves all around. He quickly told Leng Mo to attack because Taylor's magic seemed to be draining him. The fireball was too strong, and he felt like he wasn't going to last much longer. The two of them rushed forward. Taylor told them there was no point in even trying. He called for something to come back to him. Leng Mo and Bing Yu noticed that the fireball had changed directions. Phoenix pointed out that Taylor was able to control his fireball and warned them to watch out. The ball of flames headed straight towards the pair. Leng Mo could tell that there was too much energy in it. Bing Yu was an ice type, and he might end up dying if he got hit. He urged Bing Yu to move away and jumped in front of him, intending to take its impact head-on. Bing Yu didn't want him to do so. Taylor laughed at him, asking him if he really thought he could take on his fireball just because he was a fire type.